Welcome to Bad Elizabeth. I'm your host, Gideon Evans.
And I'm your host, Kathy Egan-Taylor. The premise of the show is exactly what it sounds like. Each episode, we profile a different Elizabeth, or derivation of that name, like
Elspeth.
or Busy,
Or Birdie.
who deserves to be called bad.
Some Elizabeths are very inquisitive.
About your religious beliefs.
That's our producer and engineer, Will Beckton of Jet Road Studios.
Hi, guys.
Our episode today is about Queen Isabella.
Of Spain.
The Inquisition.
What a show. Singing is not in my contract.
Welcome to Bad Elizabeth. I'm Gideon Evans.
And I'm Kathy Egan-Taylor.
We have Will Beckton here.
Hello.
And Amber is somewhere doing something.
I'm sure it's magical.
And we went out for dinner last night with a whole bunch of us, with Will and Amber, and then some different friends from different areas of life. And like 4 of the people I think we had worked with at like Michael Moore stuff, which was how we met.
We were all babies when we started out together. You know, so it's been many, many years, but we've maintained these friendships, which is great.
Yeah, you guys were probably thrown into the fire, huh? Was that TV Nation or?
Yes, TV Nation.
That was TV Nation, and wow, those were crazy times. And, you know, there weren't shows like Jackass on back then, so the idea of doing, like, stunt journalism with guerrilla tactics, that wasn't used.
Well, it was like sort of theatrical tactics, right?
Definitely.
What kind of stunts would you do? I'm trying to remember.
Oh, yeah, well, one of the ones we talked about last night, I played Joe Camel at one point, and I was
a
dressed
different time.
He was banned
Well,
as a mascot.
connected to it was a lawsuit because they thought the Joe Camel character was kind of like lovable and would attract children to want to smoke cigarettes.
Right. It was a cigarette company, and Joe Camel was kind of the mascot. So they basically abolished Joe Camel. So we decided I'd dress up like Joe Camel and go to R.J. Reynolds or whatever the company was.
Or Philip Morris or whatever it happened to be,
film them without them knowing we were going to stop by in this ridiculous costume. And I used lines from Death of a Salesman because Joe Camel was essentially fired.
Out of work.
So it was like, you can't eat the orange and throw away the peel. And
so
stuff.
is Joe Camel as Willie Loman?
Pretty much.
Or Willie Loman as Joe Camel?
Exactly.
How were you dressed as Joe Camel?
Well, he always looked suave with like a male body wearing cool clothes, and then the head was like foam.
Didn't they also say it looked like a scrotum or something like
right.
that? It had
Totally.
sort of a phallic resemblance.
Well, there was that big thing about using sex, like where you didn't realize you were seeing the word sex in like a glass of ice.
Yeah.
So I think Joe Camel was this idea. If you look closely enough, it looks like a penis, like his nose is like a penis.
It's almost like a Georgia O'Keeffe kind of thing where you're like, that's
definitely a vagina.
Something's happening. Yeah.
Yes. But she wasn't selling cigarettes.
No.
But yeah.
Well, the other thing we were talking about stunts, there was a Republican fundraiser in Cobb County, Georgia, which was where Newt Gingrich was from. So we infiltrated. But I just remember I went to Kmart because we wanted to look undercover or whatever, in disguise. Incognito. Yeah. So I went to Kmart and I bought everyone Atlanta Braves baseball hats. And I'm like, we're definitely going to mix them with this crowd.
Everybody was wearing Braves hats.
No, I just was like, just so we look like we're not New Yorkers. We're from Atlanta and we're Braves fans. This is fantastic.
I remember that segment, and you like closed down a highway.
I just remember I'd be like, go to bed at night, like, I'll be in bed by 11 o'clock tonight and this will be over with.
Right.
You know?
Like 24 hours from now, it'll all be over, even
I'll
though
be in
I'm
bed and hopefully no
bricks.
one will have attacked me.
Right. Or get arrested.
You got arrested, right?
I got detained at Disney World, dressed as a giant chicken. So
what was the chicken's?
There was this McGruff, the crime dog character. That was a real thing. He fought street crime. And Michael was like, there should be a mascot for corporate crime. So the chicken was Crackers, the corporate crime fighting chicken. And they made a giant suit.
Kind of like Big Birdish.
Yeah.
There were like maybe 2 or 3 people that wore the suit, and it really smelled inside of it.
It's kind of like the masturbating bear. Like Michael Gordon was always the masturbating bear, but every once in a while, somebody would have to pinch hit and.
Oh boy, that's pretty gross.
And be the masturbating bear on his behalf. Were you on Conan as the Crackers?
Yes. Well, yeah, Michael was a guest on an episode of Conan, but it was the NBC Conan.
Yeah.
Late night.
The late night. Anyway, Paul Rudd was a guest that episode, and Fred Schneider from B-52.
That's a great team.
I know. And Michael brought me along as the chicken to promote the show. And so at some point in the interview, Michael's like, oh, and I brought crackers. And they cut to a camera, and I'm in the hallway of NBC. And then all of a sudden, Conan had that ostrich character. What was his name?
Tamari.
Oh, Tamari, right.
Yeah, that was Dino's character, yeah.
So I'm in the hallway, and they're shooting me. They cut away to me in the hallway of NBC, 30 Rock, and then Tamari shows up, and he's like, hi, behind me.
He was an aggressive ostrich.
All of a sudden, he starts wailing. He's like, and like, I wasn't even prepared to get like smacked that hard. And I'm like, ah! And I start like running down the hallway, and the camera just kind of turns and shows like this giant chicken getting chased by this giant ostrich. And I think Paul Rudd, when he came on as a guest, he was like, can I come on with the head of the chicken? And Michael was like, no, you can't do that.
We have certain standards here.
Yes, you can't kill
we
the
draw
chicken.
the line there.
Exactly. So before we dive in, I do want to say we have a great Elizabeth, but also we have a great guest coming up later, Julie Klausner, who's such a funny performer and writer. Of course, she did Difficult People with Billy Eichner. She is the host of 2 podcasts, How Was Your Week? And Double Threat with Tom Sharpling. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
So today we are going to look at Queen Isabella of Castile. And I know you might be like, Isabella, is that an Elizabeth? Yes, it is a variation of Elizabeth.
Queen Isabella, or some people call her Queen Isabel. Isabella is kind of the Italian version because the Pope called her that.
Oh, interesting.
And she was the Pope's favorite queen.
Is it Castile or Spain? Or was Spain at this point, was it sort of like Italy as far as like it was broken up into a lot of smaller territories? Or
That's exactly right. I mean, a lot of Europe was like that. The countries we know today really weren't always like that. The people in Spain didn't even call themselves Spaniards, really. They were Castilians or Aragonese because there were these different regions. Some of them were kingdoms. There was Granada, Castile, Aragon, Andalusia. Castile was the largest region.
And let's look at the dates here. So Isabel, she was born in 1451.
Yes, so we're talking 15th century. There was a lot of infighting between the regions. So not only were there tensions with other countries like Portugal, there was like civil unrest, there were different religions. So it was a tough time. And a lot of the rulers before Isabella were pretty weak. So a lot of the people of this region weren't looking at rulers as like powerful beings because they had many years of like shitty rulers.
Well, the other thing, too, that at the time of when Isabel came into the throne, there was like lots of wild bandits running around the country, too,
Definitely.
like highwaymen. So it was just very, very unsafe.
Lawless.
It was like New York City, 1975.
Exactly. So Isabella's parents, there was a King Juan II, Dos, I guess you could say. He was the king, and his wife was another Isabella. This is another confusing thing about this story. Many Juans and Juanas and many Isabellas. But the parents of Isabella of Castile, who our episode is about, were King Juan II and Isabella of Portugal. They also were not very strong leaders, and there was a guy who was also had a lot of power named Alvaro de Luna. And he was kind of running things a lot of the time during King Juan II's rule. And I know these names kind of throw off a lot of people, as if in 500 years from now, people look back at us and we're like, who is Steve Bannon?
hopefully.
Yeah.
Who is King Steve Bannon?
Right.
Yeah, no, they all are named for each other. They all have numbers after their names, all that stuff. You really need like a John Madden flowchart, like football.
So Juan II and Isabel's mother, had some kids. One was Enrique. He was the oldest, and he would be the heir, basically, by being the oldest male. And then there was Isabella, and then there was another boy, Alfonso. So Alfonso and Enrique were seen as the heirs because they were the boys. So Isabella was not even seen as an heir, and she didn't expect to become queen.
Similar to our Elizabeth I episode, she was educated. She was really into embroidery. She knew how to read. She could speak languages. Yeah. So she was not just sitting around, looking at jewels.
Well, and Queen Elizabeth I didn't expect to really be in the running for the monarchy either, really.
Yeah, they have that in common. Anyway, at some point, the nobles rose up and they killed this guy, Luna, who is kind of the real guy running things. They executed him with a dagger.
It was like the Stephen Miller of the...
yeah, it sounded like he kind of was. And then Juan II and Isabella died, so it was time to pass along the crown. So King Enrique became the next ruler of Castile. Remember, we're not talking about all of Spain.
A province.
It's kind of a province, but it's also almost like a kingdom in and of itself.
I think basically kingdoms were declared as like, if we can get people to build walls, we'll have a kingdom.
Yeah.
Well, there's still the Basque region that's still kind of fiercely independent, at least in spirit.
Definitely. So King Enrique was not ideal as a ruler in many, many ways. Let's also remind people that incest was going on all the time.
Inbreeding.
That's a better... I mean, it's sort of incest if cousins marry. Anyway, the parents... Juan II and Isabella were first cousins, so you knew there was going to be some problems with some of the offspring.
Yeah.
So Enrique had like gigantism, and he was dressed kind of weird.
Didn't he have a big forehead or something?
He did,
Well, Peter the Great was also a giant, they said. I think he was like 6'7" or something.
Oh, wow.
He was very tall.
Presidents and talk show hosts tend to be tall.
Yes.
Abe Lincoln, right. But one other manifestation of the inbreeding was that King Enrique's sperm was not very good. It was apparently very watery.
Wait, they knew this?
Yeah, and I want to interrupt here.
Of course. This is a good place to interrupt.
I have many opinions about sperm.
We're talking about watery sperm.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I was reading some research about Ferdinand, who later became her husband, and his father had some sort of cataract surgery going on, and the way they were describing it, and there was no anesthesia. Well, of course there's no anesthesia. Yeah. Like, how did they diagnose cataracts? Like, we got to get that off your eyes. You know what I mean? So it's pretty amazing. So the fact that they know that the sperm wasn't good is pretty cool.
Apparently, I read that there were like staffers that would like masturbate him and stuff. Not to get too graphic.
So his sperm seemed more translucent than whatever the control group was.
Yes, exactly. And this was a very important thing of like, he wanted to have a child.
Well, he needed an heir. He needed a legacy.
Alfonso would become king, his brother. So it's like if the king could have a male kid, then that person would become king after he died.
Was Enrique okay mentally?
I think he was functional mentally, but I think he was very kind-hearted in a weird way, which is a wonderful trait to have as a human, but a terrible trait to have as a king. So, like, he was friendly with all these Ottoman people, and, like, a lot of the people that were Muslims would give him gifts, and he didn't like killing people, didn't like bloodshed. And I think he was just ineffectual.
Not the man for the job.
Yeah.
And the other thing on top of that is, like, in certain regions, female queens were not even recognized, Definitely. So there's a lot on his shoulders.
So he was trying to have a kid with Juana, and they were trying to get pregnant, but they called him Enrique the Impotent. That was his nickname.
That hits on every level, doesn't it?
You don't want to have that nickname.
You don't want that to stick.
They actually, I think it was very historic because they probably did artificial insemination for the first time in history.
They're doing cataract surgery. They're doing artificial insemination.
They like had a tube. Like we always talk about the turkey baster.
Yeah.
But they created some sort of tube where they put the watery sperm into, Juana.
Yeah.
And I guess eventually they did have a kid, but it was a girl, which was a huge disappointment.
Tell me about it.
Not to me.
So it was successful, but then a disappointment.
Yeah, and then the child of Enrique and Juana, who I think was also Juana, became...
there's another one coming up, too.
Oh, my God.
Every time you say Enrique, by the way, I think of Enrique Iglesias.
He's a pop singer, right?
Well, yeah, he's Julio Iglesias' son.
And I don't think he was impotent.
I don't think he's at all.
He was the opposite. Did he sing To All the Girls I've Loved Before with Willie Nelson?
Yeah.
Anyway, Isabella was a very strong-willed person and very smart and very self-assured, and people were trying to marry her off. She decided she would get final say, and that's pretty damn ballsy.
I think her first potential suitor was like 42 when she was 12.
Yeah.
And she was like, let's go a little younger.
For her to say, you can suggest names, but I'm only marrying who I want to marry, that was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
She did a lot of terrible things. We're going to get to that very soon.
She married Ferdinand.
Yeah.
When they wanted to get married, and they met like 2 days before they were married, because they were related somehow, you needed to get permission from the Pope. And so they faked a letter of recommendation from the Pope. They're like not quite sure if the Archbishop knew if it was real or not, but did it anyway.
Everything that happened in Europe, pretty much, if you were Christian, had to gain like a seal of approval from the Pope. And actually, part of this whole question of like, was Isabella an heir? It changed because there was a Pope in power who was more pro-Enrique and thinking maybe like Juana, his daughter, would become the heir. But then that Pope died. Isabella was like, yes, because then Sixtus came in, another Pope, and he somehow just was very pro-Isabella. So that really helped Isabella. But Enrique was still alive at that point, so they got married, and it was kind of like with William and Kate, where Charles is alive, but they're in waiting.
Yeah.
There was a big wedding. There was 11 days of celebration.
Awesome.
This was political because there had been whispers for many, many years that it would be cool if the Castilians and the Aragonese kind of came together and crossed their bloodlines.
Yes.
Yeah, and Ferdinand getting together with Isabella is sort of like the spark of a unified Spain. At a certain point, Enrique gets sick and he starts dying. And I think there was a story like the people around him when he was on his deathbed. He was like, can I have an hour longer to live? And they were like, no. And then he died like in a half an hour. So he was even weak in like trying to delay death.
Well, I think we all might be guilty
you don't
of
really
that as
control that. So Isabella became queen. This was God's choice. That's the way everybody thought of these things. So Isabella eventually won. She came out on top. And I think even when she married Ferdinand, she was kind of like, I'm the one who's kind of the real queen and he's kind of my consort. But then it went back and forth. And it seemed like she really dug him.
I think that they had mutual respect for each other.
Yeah. You know, part of the issue with Spain at that point in time was that it was pure chaos with all these regions. When she became queen, she was extremely strong. And there was war with Portugal. Ferdinand would be on the front lines with the soldiers fighting, and she was kind of like a quartermaster general, where she was in charge of making sure food and supplies got to the troops.
She set up hospitals.
But they also had lots of different new ways of waging war, like really heavy artillery. They had cannonballs that were flaming.
She organized a group of militiamen, so to speak, to bring a cannon to a mountain, like to carry it up to a mountain. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty incredible.
Oh, to get the high ground.
They would build like moats around a city, not just a castle. If he was too weak-kneed about causing bloodshed, she would be like, I'll do it myself. And she would go and just kill tons of people. There was lots of violence during that time. I thought Queen Elizabeth I did some really violent things, but it is nothing compared to Isabella.
Wow.
One other interesting thing, and I want to get into the Inquisition. There was a printing press available. So there was propaganda was getting
pamphleting was really big.
They had these chroniclers that would talk about stuff that was going on now, but then they'd also write about past history and reshape, like Granada is a Christian place, not a Muslim place.
So controlling the current day narrative and then some revisionist history thrown in as well.
And she was all about the propaganda, and she would bring like musicians places. When she went to the battlefield, there were always musicians that would be like, here's the queen, and then the musicians play. And in a weird way, that's propaganda too.
It's the pomp and circumstance.
Definitely. And she was really rough. In Seville, there was like, as you mentioned, bands of
highwaymen and bandits
there
just
was
robbing.
Crazy crap going on. but she really ruled with a heavy hand. And there were executions. People all over the place were being thrown onto fires and being burned. People were hung for sodomy, and they'd like cut off their balls and attach them to the dead bodies' necks. And horrible shit.
That's very mean.
Yeah, it's fucked up. But her tactics started working. People were kind of like, I'm so scared of this woman, but I love her too. It did work, and she became kind of like a model for future authoritarians like Franco. And you could see why, this idea of law and order and forcing conformity on people.
Cleaning things up. And she's created this cult of personality. Everyone just buys into it, which plants seeds for future leaders.
Definitely. And she's having babies. She ended up with like 4 kids. So there was like a season for war, and then take a break. And then they'd go to war again, and she'd have kids when war wasn't happening.
So she'd say, like, the Moors, like, see you in September.
But that's kind of amazing. What was that movie with Diane Keaton? Something Mom?
Oh.
Annie Hall?
No.
Baby Boom.
Oh, no. Anyway, sorry. So now let's talk about the Inquisition, because we all kind of know about it. Some of us from the Mel Brooks History of the World Part 1. It's a dark period. Basically, it's this idea of purifying the country, in quotes, purified, spreading Christianity
and erasing the Jews and the Islamics.
Is it Catholicism specifically?
It is Catholicism, but they call it Christianity.
Because that just was Christianity.
It was Christianity.
Yeah, Henry VIII, it wasn't Catholicism, yeah.
And her daughter ended up marrying Henry VIII.
Oh, right, Catherine of Aragon. Oh, my God.
So Henry VIII is one that stratified the church.
And that was later.
Yeah, that was later.
So they're just calling this Christendom.
Christians.
And there was like a pope.
Yes.
And you have to also keep in mind that the Ottoman Empire was extremely powerful. Also later known as the Turks, took over Constantinople, which was a big Christian city, and it became Istanbul. It's part of Turkey now.
And they were Muslim, right?
They were Muslim, but they weren't Arabic. There was Mehmet, who was the Sultan at the time of Isabella. And Spain and some of England had all these weak leaders. So there was a fear that like Christianity was going to recede and die.
Disappear, yeah.
So that was part of what Isabella wanted to do. She was like, I'm going to kick ass for the Christians. And she wanted to kind of purify Spain. And it's such a chilling word.
Was the Inquisition contained to Spain? Was that a Spanish phenomenon? Or
it's called the Spanish Inquisition, but it's also the region of Spain that's not quite Spain as it was.
Right. Well, it was invented by both Isabella and Ferdinand. So they did really invent it. So you can blame them or give, if you're, hate Jews and Muslims.
I don't think we need to give them credit.
No, I think you're right.
I think we just blame them.
I think you're right. But I think one thing I didn't understand about the Inquisition was it wasn't necessarily going after Jews per se at first, because there was this idea that the queen only ruled over Christians. And she actually was tolerant of Jews and Muslims for a while. But she was kind of like, you're not even my subjects because you're not Christian. So really what the Inquisition was, Isabella and Ferdinand met with this guy Torquemada. He was this Dominican monk who pushed this idea of like, we need to do something about these Jews and Muslims, and he kept pushing them. So we can blame him as well.
Well, who was the target of the Inquisition
The Inquisition
initially?
was Muslims and Jews. It's a little weird because basically what the Inquisition was going after were conversos, which were people that were converted from Judaism to Christianity, who kind of were backsliding back into Jewish traditions, or Muslims the same way.
Yes.
They called it Judaizing, basically. If you like hold a Passover Seder, but you're a Christian, that's like not a good thing.
Is that like a Jew with a Christmas tree?
But I think, these guys, the conversos probably would have like a Christmas tree, but they'd get in trouble if they had a mezuzah.
Yeah, mezuzah, yeah.
Maybe they didn't want to really become Christians, but their neighbors like hated Jews, and they were like, maybe I should just...
I want to be able to live through tomorrow, so maybe I should just do this.
But it became a terrible thing, the Inquisition, and a lot of people were killed. And also there were all these laws that you could confiscate property of these conversos if they got caught and were killed and put on the garrote or burned at the stake. So because there was money involved that you'd get the property, it kind of became about money, too.
So that incentivized people to rat on other people.
Totally.
It's like the witch trials. Like, who can we focus at? We're going to call her a witch.
And that's why it was called the Inquisition, like an inquiry. It sounds so innocent, but it's like, maybe come in to our auto da fe. Somebody told us that you're not eating pork or like lighting candles on a Friday night. Maybe we should investigate this.
So auto da fe, is that sort of like a trial?
Yes, it's kind of like a ceremony where there'd be these inquisitors. They were the ones who were kind of the judges. And I think once you found somebody guilty of backsliding, then you'd hand the case over to the secular folk who would do the execution.
Oh, man.
Yeah, bad shit. They would torture people until they confessed, and then after they confessed, they'd execute them. She burned a lot of people at the stake. People who were accused were subjected to the rack. There was this kind of waterboarding thing. People were crushed by cords. I'm not exactly sure what that means.
Not Wrangler jeans.
Doesn't sound
No, not
good.
corduroy pants.
But they really believed in this. I think at one point the Pope was even like, have we been treating people terribly for too long? Maybe we should ease up on it a little bit. And Isabella and Ferdinand were like, no, we like this.
Well, it's curious because I was telling you that I listened to a podcast that I didn't realize was a Catholic podcast.
Oh, interesting. Like from an organization
From
or
an
a
organization,
church?
yeah. I was just sort of like looking to see who's talked about her and what their take on the story was. And like the Pope adored them, and they were the Catholic sovereigns, the Italian Pope. They adored her, and he calls her, she was the first Catholic queen and all that stuff.
Oh,
so
wow.
she's very, very respected by obviously the winning side.
Did they sound like they admired her too, or were they taking her to task, the Catholic podcast?
No, she was like a hero of the church. You know what I mean?
Wow.
It was like people put her up there with Joan of Arc.
As awful as the Inquisition is, and then later in 1492, there was the expulsion where they basically did kick Jews and Muslims out of the country.
Which is also an interesting year because after that happened, Christopher Columbus came back.
What a year.
Yes, well, she had to wait till she was done with all the expulsions.
Right. But one question we do have to talk about, okay, from a modern perspective, this looks so terrible. And the expulsions were almost worse, probably.
I had never even heard of that. So it's the Inquisition, and what's the other one?
The expulsion.
Well, if you can't convert them, get rid of them.
Yeah, if they didn't convert, they just wanted them out of the country. So
march them to the border or put them on boats, or how would they?
I think all of the above. Like people would self-deport.
It's a matter of survival. We can't stay here or we won't live.
Keep in mind, too, there were tons of people in this area that had Jewish blood or Muslim blood. Torquemada was like, let's put things on people's clothes to know who's Jewish and who's Muslim, and we know where that sort of thing
That sounds
leads.
similar to something else.
Yes.
Well, I mean, even if you say we're looking back at the time and the context now, it sounds awful. But I mean, 100 years from now, people might look at our time and say, how the hell did that happen?
Absolutely. And also, when you do disparage a group as bad people, there's all sorts of violence that happens to them by this other citizens where they're like, these people are bad. So some of the Jews tried leaving, and then they just threw them off of boats into the ocean.
So the dehumanization, which is born of propaganda.
Definitely. As we talked about at the beginning of the episode, this wasn't called Spain. They didn't call themselves Spaniards. It was a hodgepodge and really chaotic and violent with all these different groups. And to some degree, this idea of purification, of let's drive these people out, not nice and not good, but it did lay the groundwork for this is going to become Spain.
And we're going to introduce future populations to the siesta and tapas.
Oh, my God.
And sangria.
Well, what was the drink that Griffin Matthews said?
I know. I have to look it up.
Tinto Verano.
Yeah, Verano. Such a wonderful culture. And I'm sure wherever you are in Spain, and I've only been to Barcelona. Have you been to Spain?
I've been all over. I mean, I've been to San Sebastian, which is in the northern part. That's the Basque region that we mentioned. I've been to Bilbao, where the Guggenheim is, Barcelona, and I've been to Madrid.
It's still pretty regional. I mean,
yes,
if you go to Barcelona, that's definitely Catalonia.
Yeah, it's very, very regional.
And this expulsion of the Muslims was very complicated because Isabella had to wage war against Granada, which was a very rough terrain. And I've never been there, but it sounds beautiful.
Yeah.
There was amazing architecture there. It was like the jewel of that region. It was just this beautiful place. And you've visited, but when you go there, you do feel like, oh, this area feels more Muslim influence.
Or have Moorish architecture or something like the tiles, whatever they use, you know.
So many countries in the world, the wonderful things about them were born
from blood.
From terrible stuff.
And human sacrifice.
Slavery.
Yeah.
Speaking of colonization, let's talk about Columbus a little bit.
Christopher Columbus, yes. So he had approached the Queen before, you know, I want to explore the New World, and she was all for it, but hey, we got to get over this war right now, and I don't really have the money to finance it. So he returned in 1492.
Yeah, and he was Genovese, so he wasn't even Spanish. He was Italian.
From Genoa?
Yes, exactly. I love their salami.
I was going to say, me too.
So yeah, Columbus had been wooing Isabella and Ferdinand for a while. And he was this kind of crazy guy. Not crazy, but he was like a seductress.
Well, he was the Admiral of the Seas.
Well, he asked them for that title.
In his head, he was the Admiral of the Seas. And then he became it. Vision board.
Yeah, and he didn't need that much money. I always imagined this was going to be a really expensive endeavor.
Excursion, yeah.
And it was just 3 ships.
Nina, the Pinto, and the Santa Maria.
Exactly. Good job.
Thank you.
And there were 90 men. But Isabella kept kind of pushing him off. She was like, who knows if he's really going to find anything? He wanted to go to the Indies.
Yes.
And eventually there was someone in Isabella's court that was like, maybe we should do this thing. And that turned out to be a huge deal.
So Columbus was Italian, but sailing under a Spanish flag?
Exactly. Like anything he happened to find and plant Isabella's flag on it, he'd be able to write Isabella and say, you're now the ruler
Here's this territory that I have for you.
Yes. He used the Canary Islands as his launching point. That, I guess, is near Spain. They sailed for a long time, and the crew wanted to do a mutiny. They didn't know that they were going to bump into anything. And then eventually they just start hitting islands.
Yeah,
in the Caribbean and Hispaniola.
Hispaniola is now Dominican Republic and Haiti, right?
Yeah, that's the connected island, yes.
Okay.
This reminds me a little bit of, it just has to do with like when you're ruling or whatever, but the way Queen Elizabeth was the Shakespeare queen, she's the Columbus queen.
Definitely.
Yeah, the manifest destiny, you know?
Yeah. So this was the beginning of the colonization of the Western Hemisphere. They kind of, Western culture, quote unquote, became expanded, not just from Europe, but now it was the New World. And Isabella was super happy about this.
Did missions start right away? Like, was there a goal to make the New World Christian kind of right away?
That was one of the main things, other than like finding valuable spices and
gold, perhaps.
Hey, look, there are indigenous people, and they seem open to taking Christ as their savior.
All right, so Queen Isabel, what do we think? Do we think she's bad?
I think she's definitely bad.
That's a loaded question, as it always is. I think she's definitely bad. She did so many atrocious things, but also the context of her time and who she was and her position.
I just think that she did so many bad things beyond just being a colonizer. She really did engage in some terrible things. It's easy for me to say she goes into the bad category, but she deserves credit for some things. When you look at Spain, I mean, she made it. She started to make that, whether you like it or not. That was part of what she did.
And also being a woman at that time, being a monarch at the time, being a monarch who was respected and seen, so to speak.
Yeah. With any king or queen,
it's complicated.
You admire their cruelty in a weird way. I think a lot of people do, right?
I mean, there is a certain amount of respect.
But we are talking about her, too. We're not talking about Enrique.
Yes.
And he was kind of nice in a weird way and tolerant. And those people don't get remembered by history.
Well, he's kind of milquetoasty. He didn't really do anything.
And in the 15th century, ruling with an iron fist is pretty understandable. But I guess when you throw in the Inquisition and things that basically border or overlap with ethnic cleansing, it kind of gets tricky.
Yeah, and it really was ethnic cleansing. You hear that word. This is exactly that. The idea of like purifying our nation by getting out non-Christians.
It's a curious thing because, you know, you brought this up earlier that she said that she didn't like bullfighting.
Yeah. She didn't dislike it because the bulls were harmed or killed. She was like, why are we wasting a perfectly good Christian on a bull?
See, I would say, why are we wasting 2 viable kidneys?
Yes.
But they probably weren't that advanced back then.
No, I doubt they did. They did have a semen tube.
Yeah,
And rudimentary cataract surgery.
exactly. Queen Isabella did a lot of bad things, as well as a few good things. At the very least, we can call her a quote-unquote difficult person. And she was in cahoots with many difficult people, like Torquemada and Christopher Columbus. So joining us is someone who knows a thing or two about difficult people. She created and co-starred in the hilarious Hulu series, Difficult People. Welcome from New York City, actress, writer, performer, and dare I say, queen of podcasting, Julie Klausner.
Hi.
Julie, thank you for being here and joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So great to see you, Julie.
Likewise. Oh, I'm so excited to be here. I'm a huge Torquemada fan,
Who isn't?
the Jews. I mean, look, I just know
right.
from, history of the world. Hey, Torquemada, what do you say?
I know we've been quoting a history of the world a bit.
So this episode is about Queen Isabella.
And we must start by saying we know you're not a historian. I should say an historian.
And historian, right? It's like the H is considered a vowel in this case.
It's really lame, even though that's the correct way.
I love it.
Do you like saying an in front of H words?
No, just an historian.
Okay. None of us are historians, so we'll muddle through this. But yeah, Queen Isabella had no problem being feared more than loved. I mean, it worked for her as a queen. Is that an effective tactic for working in showbiz, do you think?
I think it's an effective tactic for any woman over 35. You have to just sort of appreciate your liberation from the male gaze. Gaze. May we never be liberated from the other kind.
And so can you be feared and loved simultaneously, or is it just one or the other?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at my relationship to 90s James Spader. Like that hair. And I know it didn't last. It was just one of those things that was just like too good to be eternal. But when it was brushed and blow dried, I mean, like around Sex, Lies, and Videotape, we'll say, oh my God.
Yeah.
What an American accomplishment.
The film or the man?
Yes.
Both.
All of it. Yeah.
So this is about Queen Isabella. We also do one about Elizabeth I of England. These women were both ruling monarchs, so they actually really need to work extra hard to prove themselves. As a female comedian, as a female in show business, like how has this impacted your sort of drive? Just being a queen, being a woman of power.
It's good to be the queen.
And they also, these queens, at the beginning of their reigns, everyone was always like, women can't be leaders. And they had to really prove it extra hard.
Sure. I mean, there's definitely the backwards and heels element of it, but we don't get nearly as many oil paintings done of us that are extremely flattering and dresses that have no stretch next to like small dogs, which I think needs to be addressed, and not with AI.
You can't put that into a line in the budget of your shows that as the showrunner and the writer, you get an oil painting?
Lately, the contracts are written in blood. Like I was watching that America's Next Top Model doc, and the contestants were saying what the conditions were in the contract. And I'm like, is that still up for, where can I sign? Not that I was ever a contender. But at the time you'd think, oh, reality shows and their contracts are so crazy. And now you're like, there's a contract? Things have changed.
Well, you're happy to get a cup of tea,
Oh, a cup of anything.
The green M&Ms is the cliche one, right? That was what Van Halen got.
It was actually a way of them, the rumor is, or the myth is that it was a way for them to test that people were actually reading the writer.
Yeah.
They found someone picking out green M&Ms. They're like, we're good.
Yeah. And just a way of exerting power and control.
So as Gideon sort of ingeniously pointed out, the Jews were really pressured to convert to Christianity during the Inquisition. So a lot of Jews celebrated Christmas and they had to resist backsliding into Jewish traditions, So you were part of a wonderful video project called Christmas Time for the Jews.
That was my first credit for like anything for television and comedy writing, I think. That was so cool.
It's famous.
It's a great short. It was a TV funhouse, and I was like so delighted to be able to submit jokes for this project. And I just sent like a whole bunch, and Robert Smigel chose the one about going to see Fiddler on the Roof with actual Jewish actors.
Oh my God.
That was when Rosie O'Donnell was in Fiddler as Golda. It was Rosie and Harvey Fierstein, and the sexual chemistry was just overwhelming. I mean,
it just lit the place on fire.
That was mine, and I got a credit. And the cool thing about that is like the way the credits are paced out to the music, like it holds on the names a little longer. So I always get emails around Christmas when they rerun it saying, "Wow, that's so cool that, you wrote this." I'm like, well, one of the jokes, but I'll take it because it's such a cool thing to be a part of, right?
Well, yeah, I guess for our listeners, I mean, and we'll put it on our show notes and whatnot. It's basically Darlene Love who sings that famous Christmas "Baby, Please Come Home." Yeah. So she sang a song about what Jews do on Christmas, going out for Chinese food, that type of stuff, where like the Jews have the town to themselves for the night.
Did you do that stereotypical thing? I mean, stereotypical
oh, sure. We
of eating Chinese food?
Absolutely. Jews and Chinese food is like a really long, beautiful tradition for many different reasons.
Definitely.
And Christmas is getting harder and harder to get a table. I love doing that. The go to a movie thing, it depends on the movie. I mean, but yeah, we absolutely used to do that growing up for sure.
And what do you think they were doing the Jews, it was a rough time during Christmas, I imagine, during the Spanish Inquisition.
Oh, Jesus
Like
Christ.
If you were living in Spain at the time or what was pre-Spain, would you be able to pretend you're not Jewish and pass as a Christmas celebrating?
One of those things where you're going to have to ask the person with the weapon.
Right.
Well, the funny thing is people think that I'm Jewish, and I don't understand why. Well, I think because I grew up culturally mostly with Jewish friends and in Jewish households and know more about Shabbat dinner and those sort of traditions.
Shabbat on Fridays, and you got so you know how to like tear out a piece of the challah and pass along.
One of my best friends converted, and she makes gundi, which is the Persian stew. I mean, I still dream about that. It's so good.
Oh, Persian Jews are never, ever turn down an invitation from a Persian Jew for Shabbat dinner.
Exactly. Getting back to Isabella, Christopher Columbus was her henchman, so to speak. When you were growing up, what did they teach you about Columbus in school?
1492, that he sailed the ocean blue. And I know the three names of his boats.
Ooh.
Which were?
Okay, go for it.
The Nina, the Pinta. Pinta or Pinto? Pinto's
I
a
think
car.
You're right, Pinta.
Pinto was the explosive car.
The Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. And that was pretty much it. I didn't get into the like Howard Zinn of it all until high school. So my Christopher Columbus education was the flashcard version and the just whatever like curriculum, I don't know, I want to say Eisenhower signed off on. I'm not that old, but it's like it was just kind of an antiquated idea about who he was and what he did.
Well, it's weird a little bit. We're not Gen Z, right?
Right.
It's weird because obviously Columbus was such a dickwad and just did a lot of horrible things.
Sure.
But as a non-Gen Z or non-millennial, I do have that moment when they're like, Columbus Day is canceled. And I'm like, really? Maybe just because I associated it with missing school.
Well, you still get a day off, but now it's Indigenous.
I know.
Day.
It should be Indigenous, but it is weird how we hold on to the things from our childhood for no reason. But
as a kid, a day off is a day off.
That's true.
Right? You get to watch Price is Right, even though it's the Drew Carey hosted one instead of the Bob Barker one.
And now there's allegations about Bob Barker, but we don't have to go into that.
Those have been there for a while. Those have been around for a while. Yeah.
We're talking about Columbus. We're talking about looking at the history that we learned when we were growing up versus what's happening now. Like even Cesar Chavez is in the news.
Yes.
They're going to have to change a lot of streets here in LA.
They're going to have to recast him in at least 3 projects.
Exactly. The world is full of difficult people.
Agreed.
Can we talk about your show, Difficult People?
I would love nothing more.
It's one of my favorite go-tos when I just want to tune out to the world. I've seen probably every episode like at least 6 times.
Oh,
it makes me laugh every time.
Thank you so much.
So let's talk about how that came together. Obviously, it's based on your experiences as a working performer in New York City, and you're Julie Klausner, but you play Julie Klausner.
Kessler.
Kessler, I'm sorry.
No, Julie Klezmer is my burlesque name.
I know. I saw both of those shows.
Yeah, what I do with an accordion is disgusting.
So when you were creating this character, how did you differentiate her from yourself and also make yourself an appealing character? Because you're compelled to watch it because you love to see her fail and you love to see her sharp edges.
You want to play the asshole or the clown or the fool. Like those are the most fun parts to play. As a comic, you don't want to be the ingenue. Like I can't imagine anyone. There's just nothing to do there. There's nothing to find as an actor. So I always wanted to play like a Kenny Powers or Larry David, and just characters that mostly men have gotten to play in the past that, they give themselves the best parts because they're the most fun. Yeah, I guess the differentiation was something that I had to constantly be aware of. And Scott King, who was in the room with me all the time, was very, very good about pointing out, well, that's a Julie Klausner thing more than a Julie Kessler thing, because Julie Klausner has more insecurities and beats herself up more, and Julie Kessler just blames everything on the world. So when I would be tempted to be like self-deprecating on the show, that was always helpful to remember that that's me, that's not her. She thinks she's perfect.
You bared your teeth in everything. Like, this is what Gideon and I were talking about. Like, the things you must have gone through standards and practices, because the bombs you dropped.
No,
No, not at all. Like,
no, we had a great
there
lawyer.
weren't any like celebrity burns that you were told that's too far?
No, they were fine. They were
wow.
cool. Like, oddly enough, yeah, we got some notes legally, but we were pretty good about saying things like allegedly on occasion, and but we weren't told like that's off limits and like enough with the Kevin Spacey jokes. That man's a dear friend of mine.
That is so funny.
That was really important to me, to like include a Kevin Spacey joke in every script. And most of them got through, but there was one in every episode at one point. They just get edited out. But that was like a huge, point of contention for me, that he hadn't suffered consequences at the time.
Well, now he is, I suppose.
I saw one of the episodes recently, and I was kind of amazed. You had a Charlie Rose pervert comment.
Yeah.
And I think that was before the Me Too stuff.
The whole show was before Me Too.
But how did you know he was a pervert?
I had a feeling.
Oh, God,
you
were
could just
genius.
look at someone.
No, there's just, spidey sense that I hadn't heard anything at the time. It was just a vibe.
Wow.
Number one, it's a creepy black box set.
Yeah.
And just the way that he would speak with women differently than he would speak with men. And you could also look at where his eye line was going sometimes.
Oh, interesting.
His eyes were weird. They were a little odd, his eyes. They were.
When he was interviewing a woman, his eyes were all over the place.
Really? I have to look back at those. Yeah.
No one wants to go back. Don't go back and visit those.
Okay, I won't.
I love all these documentaries where they do a documentary about a famous person and they'll use as archival footage like a Matt Lauer or a Charlie Rose interview, and they just have to like cut around the interviewers or you just hear the voice.
Distract you.
You can't even look at it.
I'm trying to learn about what Diddy did. Like, now I'm thinking about what Matt Lauer did.
Well, I'm thinking about like all my music selection. Half the artists that I listen to have been canceled. So.
Oh, really? You have like an R. Kelly super mix, or what's on there?
Ignition is a great song. Come on.
It is. Oh, we wouldn't be talking about him if Ignition were not a great song.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like I read an interview that when you were making the show was coming out, but you said basically it was like a fever dream. Like if Scott Rudin said to you, Julie Klausner, I can give you all the money in the world. You can do whatever you want. What would your show be? And that's how you said you wrote the script for Difficult People.
Absolutely. Although I don't think I used Scott Rudin as an example, did I?
He's trying to make a comeback now.
You basically cited anyone who had all the power in Hollywood that could give you whatever you want.
Interesting. It was absolutely a dream show. I treated it like I was granted a wish to just... And also I treated it like it was the last chance that I would ever have to make something, which time will tell if I was right. But I will say every season finale I treated like the series finale. Everything I wanted to do, I tried to stuff it in like an everything cookie, one of those cookies that has like cereal and oatmeal and
cranberries.
Yeah, everything. And we were so lucky because of the timing and the circumstance. And we had Amy on our side defending us when, people are like, I don't know if that's funny. And she's like, it is. And they're like, okay, cool. And Hulu was very new. We were really like their first scripted show. This was before like Handmaid's Tale even. So
yeah, we
had a lot of liberty to kind of set the tone. And they were so great to work with. And they gave me so much freedom. I'm always going to be grateful to them.
Well, it was also like to cast Andrea Martin, who must have been your comedic hero growing up, as your mother. And every one of the characters is a difficult person.
Oh, absolutely.
I was just thinking about some of my favorite episodes, the John Mulaney with the penny farthing bike.
Yeah.
John Mulaney, who plays this sort of steampunk character.
Sure.
Like, I love that you, being a New Yorker and, like, having lived there, and Will and Gideon now lives there too, people don't realize that these people exist. These precious people exist in New York City.
Sure.
So I love that you shine a spotlight to see, like, this is what we walk around with every day. And we, as New Yorkers, we don't even really respond to it.
No, that was fun. Well, we still laugh at you, though. I mean...
Yeah.
I also loved Patches the Clown. I thought was brilliant.
I don't understand why people call Patches a clown. She was just an actress, just a character.
With balloons?
Yeah, she had balloons and overalls. And I guess like there are some clowns that wear overalls. And I guess the name Patches is a clown's name. But it's funny because she's not a clown.
Can you explain the premise of that episode?
It was basically that Brits and Aussies are getting all the roles in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
And when they do American accents, it just sounds insane. And so I went out for, at the time, there was that show. What the hell was it called? It was the one with the guy from The Wire and the lady from The Thing. It was like the story of their like affair. It was The Affair.
Oh, the affair.
Right?
Oh, right. McNulty, the guy who played McNulty.
Right. And so, one was British and one was Australian. And so their American accents would have a lot of hard R's. And so Scott King and I were talking about a funny thing of mine to be like, maybe if I'll land this part if I pretend I'm Australian and I'm like landing these hard R's, and the casting directors thought I was someone who was like developmentally challenged. And so they cast me and then found out that I was faking it, but I wasn't faking being that. I was faking being Australian. And so there was a lot of farce around that ended up with us in an Outback steakhouse. I don't know if we were able to say Outback though. Anyway.
And the other one I loved is when you and Billy had double lives in New Jersey. Like,
yeah,
you had a bad hair day and you ended up in Hoboken and you became like a real housewife of New Jersey.
Italian Pinata is definitely like one of my favorite. My favorites are Patches is up there, Italian Pinata, absolutely, and then Strike Rat, which is the Woody Allen one.
Oh yeah, the Strike Rat.
Yeah.
And you had Cole Escola, who's always so funny.
Oh yeah.
Are you allowed to take credit for his success?
Why not? I mean, what am I going to get, a cease and desist? What are the consequences of taking credit? Zero.
You should make him cast you as Mary Todd Lincoln.
I don't know if casting works on the blackmail method.
Too bad. Well,
no, I love Cole. I wrote that role for Cole.
Oh, he's fantastic. Yeah. And Billy is great.
Billy, and also Cole was also in the writer's room as well for seasons 2 and 3. So Cole's voice is all over the show in addition to his incredible on-camera talent.
You know, we want to also talk about After Difficult People is also, you've been sort of the queen of podcasting. I think you started back in 2012, correct?
Yeah. It was that before your time kind of curse where before your time also means before it was like monetized properly. So yeah. I was doing it a long time ago and I brought it back recently and I'm having a great time. It's just so nice to be back behind the mic.
Was it called podcasting when you started?
Yes, it was called podcasting. It wasn't called, I don't know, something old timey. I remember it was very influenced by Marin's podcast. And also Tom Sharpling had a radio show on WFMU that was a podcast as well. They'd sort of put out the show the next day as in podcasting form. And Patton Oswalt was very encouraging to me because he always liked it when I went on Tom Sharpling's show and said publicly, like, Julie should have a podcast. And I sort of took that as a cue. And yeah, I do my own show, which is How Was Your Week? And then I do this show, Double Threat, with Tom Sharpling.
With Tom. Oh,
yeah.
That lends itself to another Isabella question, actually.
Oh.
Because she shared power with Ferdinand.
Oh, funny.
That was a really
unique thing.
Rare thing. Like they basically could make decisions without even asking the other person. It was kind of a wild thing for monarchs to be like that.
A brain.
And he was like on the front line of the wars, but then she was like the quartermaster general where she would make sure the troops had enough food to eat. So it was kind of amazing.
Interesting.
But that's hard to share power. So you and Tom, how do you guys share power on your podcast?
I find that podcast hosting is probably the lowest form of power, if we're using that word as it's defined or as I know it to mean. But Tom and I have a great rapport. We are absolutely in that place where we'll say the same thing at the same time. We'll both think of the same joke, and that's always so satisfying. And that we try to keep each other on our feet to kind of not predict the next thing, but to sort of throw a wrench into whatever pattern, because we're both used to talking alone into mics.
Yeah.
So to have another person there to kind of interrupt that is always a fun challenge because it makes it more fun to like build something. And I think we both kind of know the rules of it, which is, we never like rag on each other. We just rag on other people, which was the rule in Difficult People also. Billy and Julie would never fight, and we never didn't know what the other was up to on the show. That was like a big rule for us.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because there's a lot of duos where there'll be a fight or a misunderstanding, and we just didn't think that was fun, that it was very much us against the world. And I do feel that with Tom as well. Like, I think it's a matter of sort of figuring out that the two of you are on the same team and everybody else is fair game.
This
So
is
that
really
would be good advice to us, I was going to say.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah.
Katie and I were texting even last night, and we were texting about something, and I was about to text him. We were talking about Hope Davis.
Oh.
He wrote, The Day Trippers was a great movie. And at the same time, I wrote, The Day Trippers was a great movie.
Oh,
We often have
look at that.
shared brain syndrome.
I haven't seen that since it came out.
It was so good.
I need to revisit it.
There was a Wallace Shawn play that I saw last night, and she's in the cast.
Yeah, she's incredible.
And it made me think of the Day Trippers, but her understudy played the role last night.
You missed out on Hope. You were hopeless.
But the other, that's really smart. But this stuff about you have these rules with Tom, that's really interesting for us to hear because we are so new at co-hosting a podcast. And like, I've noticed like we get almost all positive feedback like on the comments, but there are a couple of negative ones. And one was like, you guys interrupt each other way too much.
Oh, well, that's going to happen. That means you're enthusiastic and you're in the flow.
So we shouldn't worry about that.
No.
Okay, good.
That's Will's problem.
Totally.
Right, the editor.
It's okay.
Oh, Will Beck. No, I thought that was the commenter's name.
I mean, it could be both, but
Yeah, maybe.
Are you going on Apple Podcasts and trashing us?
That's really funny.
I just added a couple letters and numbers behind my name. And
Oh, no. So passive aggressive.
No.
I did want to ask a couple of questions about Schmigadoon.
Please.
Can I do that?
Of course.
Because I love it, and I'm a huge musical theater
are
fan.
you?
I used to collect records of all those shows, and I just see everything.
Yeah.
I used to see like bombs intentionally.
Oh, yeah. Those are the best.
Just for the fun of it.
Absolutely.
Like I saw My Favorite Year, the musical, and like
God.
Nick and Nora.
Huh?
There's something amazing about those like train wrecks.
What's your favorite show?
It's not my favorite show, but I've always been obsessed with chess. Is
Oh,
that something
really?
you like?
That's cool. Did you like the new production?
I thought the reworking was good. There were, it's tough to knit a sweater around a button that you find,
Yeah, no, that's a good way of putting it.
It's so weird that the music was out for so long, but there was no show.
Well, there's a tradition of that. Like Andrew Lloyd Webber would start with an album.
Oh, really? Which shows were like that?
Jesus Christ Superstar and Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. And
Oh, wow.
I think Evita. I'm not certain. Yeah, they'd start with a record. And then Lin-Manuel Miranda's doing that with the Warriors that came out as an album. And now they're doing the show.
Right. I saw that.
Yeah.
My dog growing up bit the author of the Warriors book.
What?
Because my sister went to
Okay,
school with
that
his
is-
daughter, and we had this crazy German Shepherd, and he bit Saul Urich, who wrote The Warriors.
Oh my God. That is such a great claim to fame.
Yeah, that dog bit some important people. But tell me about how Schmigadoon came to be.
Of course. Yeah, no, I met Cecily and I knew that she was going to be on this show. And she set me up with Cinco and Ken, who are the creators. And I had lunch with them. And I told them that, like, as someone who loves musicals, I find it frustrating interacting with people who don't like musicals because not only are they really, really insistent on making you know that, but they also are invested in things that are sort of similarly hard to kind of buy as an audience member, but they don't see the parallels. And when people are frustrated about how unrealistic musicals are because people burst into song, you have to sort of say, yeah, but you're like into superhero stuff and
Exactly.
Marvel
Crap.
and there's a lot of things that happen in those that are not uncrazy. And they really like that take because I'm sure they met with other writers that were just massive fans of musicals because you can't really make fun of musicals unless you love musicals. It's not like you're going in there to shit on them. It just doesn't work that way. So I was really happy that they were pleased with my take on the pilot script that I'd read and I really liked. I think they also liked that I was a sort of a hard comedy writer because it was a Broadway video, kind of Lorne Michaels produced it. And if it's coming from that SNL sort of world, like you want someone who knows how to write hard jokes. So I was really, really lucky to have been on all 3 seasons, actually, because we wrote the 3rd season. It just never got produced. And
Oh my God, I had no idea. What's the theme of season 3?
it's Schminto the Woods. So it's all the shows from like the 80s and 90s, which is a real mixed bag.
I
But
bet.
the device around it is this journey through the woods and
Oh, that's smart.
or the schmuds. So it's great. I'm so proud of it.
I hope it happens.
Yeah, me too.
Well, could the musical kind of add excitement
I hope so.
to make the 3rd season
I
happen?
absolutely hope so. I think I'm going to wear something at the opening that says like free season 3 or
Oh
something.
my God, you totally should.
What's the tagline for Schmigadoon? Like, how would you pitch that for our listeners so they know exactly what the show is?
It's a couple that is from the real world that is stuck in a musical that ends up like having an issue with their relationship, and they're stuck in this sort of musical land, and they have to kind of figure out how they're going to get out of it. To have 2 people from the real world kind of interact with people that are, archetypes from a musical is part of the fun of it.
That's hilarious. So season 3 is
Yeah.
Sondheim-y, but you did have some Sondheim like in season 2 as well.
I love season 2. Season 2 is my favorite.
So great. And you had some kind of Stephen Schwartz in there too.
Yes, mine was the Godspell episode.
I was curious because I know you work with Andrea Martin, obviously,
Yes.
and Martin Short. Do you know about this?
Oh, I've got to see that documentary. And I'm looking for a screener. If anyone has a screener,
I can send a note to the guy, Nick Davis.
if you don't mind, because I'd love to interview him on the show.
This documentary is so good.
I want to see it so badly, and I want to boost it because there's a production of Godspell, the first production of Godspell in Toronto, and it was just like one of these kind of Forrest Gump like intersections of every great, like Gilda Radner and Andrea and Marty Short and Eugene Levy and
Vincent, what's his name? Victor Garber, rather.
Yeah, he was Jesus. Yeah.
yeah. No, it was incredible. I really want to see that so badly.
You'll love that documentary.
Can't wait.
Thanks again for joining us. We want to bring it a little bit back to Isabella,
Sure.
since that's the theme of the episode. With the knowledge you have about her, do you have like a verdict about whether she was bad?
Yeah, so I'm gonna say thumbs down on her.
So if you were a queen, Julie, what kind of queen would you be, do you think, if you were to compare yourself?
I'd be a benevolent, kind queen
I'm sure.
who would be draped in. I'm not one to keep the jewelry in the safe. I think it's safest if you wear all of it. Have you done Liz Taylor on the show, or they have to be bad so that she doesn't count?
She was a badass, Liz Taylor. We had Michael Musto talk about her.
I love Liz Taylor. I'm a huge fan of Liz Taylor. I loved her attitude towards jewelry and caftans. She also like had an appetite. She's like lust for life. She and Dick Burton, I'm obsessed with that relationship. And then she was really like one of the first ahead of her time kind of allies to the LGBT community. And so I'm going to say if I were a official queen, because I'm just like an unofficial cult queen right now, I would dress like Liz Taylor in the movie Boom. She's wearing a headpiece in that looked fiberglass and a lot of caftans. And it's just like a wonderful, wonderful film. So I would do that. And then the rest of it, I'd just sort of live the way I already do.
Michael Musto's favorite Liz Taylor movie is Boom.
Is that right?
That's a killer movie, yeah.
It is a masterpiece. It's John Waters' favorite as well.
So, Julie, so you've got the podcasting. What's coming up next for you? Hopefully, a Schmigadoon Series 3.
That would be great.
I support you in wearing a T-shirt to the Broadway premiere.
Yeah. I'm going to keep podcasting. So you can find my podcast wherever you get podcasts. There's How Was Your Week? And then there's Double Threat. And I'm working on a bunch of things. So hopefully one of them will get made and then I can plug that. But for the time being, they are in like script form or pre-production form or development form or financing form. So hopefully they will be out into the open soon and you'll have stuff you can come and see that I wrote, which would be a dream.
Well, we can't wait. And your stuff is always so great.
Thank you.
So fun and so interesting and so out of the box,
Thank
too.
you so much.
We just are so happy to have you here. Thank you. This has been a blast.
Thank you so much. Invite me back anytime. This was so much fun.
Absolutely.
You've earned every bit of where you are, and you kept it steady. And it's like you did a lot of stuff to get where you are, but you forged a career that's your own and unique.
Thank you.
What I really love is your attitude. Even though we've all been beaten down in this industry, particularly of late,
It's a rough moment.
you still have that attitude. The world is your oyster, and you still love plays. And I think that's really important to remember that.
Thank you.
To be inspired by that.
Absolutely. And there is stuff out there that will still inspire you. You just have to find it.
This was a blast. Thanks again to Julie Klausner for joining us. It was so fun talking to her about Isabella and all of her really amazing projects. Definitely check out her podcasts, How Was Your Week and Double Threat. Thank you for listening to Bad Elizabeth. Please rate and review the show on places like Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
We are Bad Elizabeth Pod on Instagram and Substack.
Bad Elizabeth is recorded at Jet Road Studios. It is hosted by me, Gideon Evans.
And me, Kathy Egan-Taylor. It is produced and engineered by Will Beckton, and our executive producer is Amber Beckton.
Our theme music was composed by Alexis Cuadrado and Danny Gray.
Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.